So, not so much a news topic, more a PSA, a public service announcement. This week there was the arrival of, I would say, a pretty poor, and these words may come back to haunt me if it actually turns out to be true, but I'm pretty sure it's not. A fake Switch to
Hmm.
a quote unquote reveal, leak rather. Box art, some renders of the console running, some bizarre joypads, fake sort of instruction manuals and stuff. Yeah, I think, we're going to be seeing a lot of this stuff happening. It happened with the first Switch, right? I mean, I've put in our docket here a link to the first plausible looking fake for the original Switch, right? Which was this
Right.
kind of oval design.
Oh,
I
the
mean, it
one that
was,
the guy 3D printed.
yep,
And
That was
actually
yep,
impressive.
that was so cool. He actually made a real physical model and like did photo shoots with it laying on his desk. And it's like, it was very convincing as like, oh,
yep.
this is a real object because it was.
Yeah, but this is kind of like not quite as impressive. But we're going to
No.
start seeing a bunch of these stuff of this stuff, right? And well, this particular fake seems to be suggesting that it's basically a tablet with jumbo joypads in a bizarre kind of. They've expanded the joypads for no apparent
I
reason.
so Rich, I think what it is they're trying to whoever made this mock-up is trying to say, hey, look, this new Switch is a much larger physical device. It has a bigger screen, right?
Right.
And so now to adapt the old Joy-Con to it, you need these weird shell things, but like
Doubtful.
Nintendo would never do that. Like in terms of, well, I say that, but they also released the Frankenstick for the 3DS, so I guess all bets are off.
That adapter
Do you
thing.
remember that for the original
Yeah.
Yeah, it
3DS?
was it was incredible, wasn't it? It was. I think the sort of term is like a kludge. It's
Yeah.
Yeah,
just like a kind of
That's a technical
sort of
term.
really crap
and I think
sort
the
of
best thing about the Frankenstick was that I think it used IR for
stick.
communication, as in when you
Well,
set your 3DS in it, the IR transmitter would be pointing directly at a receiver on the Frankenstick shell, and I think that's how it communicated.
It's kind of smart.
okay. Yeah, but generally, I just think these sort of bizarre fakes they really make me laugh. And if Matrix was here, he'd be laughing too. Um, but I just want to quickly talk about stuff. Rumors that have emerged for the Switch 2, which I do think have some merit, right? Because there is actually a trusted leaker out there called Copite7Kimi, who basically seems to possibly have some connection with fabrication companies in Taiwan.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but basically, he identified a cut down version of the latest Tegra. The latest Tegra is T234. He identified a Nintendo specific variant called T239. So it has 8 ARM cores. Seems to have a GPU based on the NVIDIA Ampere Generation 30 series. There's confusion as to how many cores. Could be 2048, could be 1536, but that would be maximums, right? Because they may disable some of the cores to
Yes.
get more chips off the production line. And yeah, I mean, that looks like a really, really solid upgrade. Don't go into this thinking you're going to be getting a portable Xbox Series S or anything, but I think it's a highly creditable upgrade, and it's kind of. I was thinking to myself that Nintendo doesn't typically embrace new technology, but by the time it appears, Ampere came out in 2020, and
I
this would be a
know.
2024 product, so it kind of makes sense, right?
Yeah, it actually isn't too far off what the Switch did, I guess, because when
Yeah,
does
that was
actually the
2015, and it came out what when
yeah
20. Well, when
John?
was it,
What,
John?
when did
But
that come out?
the
It was
Switch,
20. Yeah,
it came out
20.
in like March 2017.
That's what it is.
2017. Yeah, a couple of years gap then. So yeah, the gap would actually be wider this time around. But yeah, I mean, we've got some supporter questions about the whole Switch 2 thing. This one from Johan van Hellemont. Hey DF, when the first Switch launched, its unique selling point, besides first-party titles, was the full console experience on the go. Now, however, given the popularity of the Steam Deck and other powerful handhelds, how do you think Nintendo will position the follow-up? Yeah, interesting, right? I mean, fundamentally, they can't go back on the Switch concept. We've talked about this before. It's got to be a mobile and a home console, I think.
Yep. The main reason beyond anything else, yes, the Switch is successful, but on top of that, this was the generation that allowed Nintendo to finally consolidate their development resources, right? Like, I think supporting portable and home consoles was extremely difficult. Like, when they first took that approach with the original Game Boy, it was less so because Game Boy games were fairly simple and basic to make. But then as the hardware started to shoot up and you get to like the DS and eventually 3DS era, like creating those games required significant resources, not as much as a home console, but still quite a bit. And I think that really split Nintendo off. So Switch saved them from that and allow them to focus on a single platform. And there's no doubt in my mind they want to continue that going forward. I think they'd be more likely to stay portable only than anything else if they had to pick between the two. But I think they'll I think they'll stick with the hybrid model.
Yeah, absolutely.
Looking at this, though, I don't think Nintendo actually has to position the device in any different way than it did the previous Switch, based upon the existence of Steam Deck and ROG Ally or any of those things, because those are completely non-competing devices, I would say, on average, because they require more setup time, more user knowledge, the existence of a PC library, Steam accounts, all these things that are much more niche than picking up a game in the store and popping in your Switch and playing it. So I don't think it is even on the same realm of competition. And I think that the recent CMA, everything is all these regulatory agencies and everyone has come to the realization that no one is competing with Nintendo. And it's kind of interesting to see at that point, because I actually thinking about that, I don't think the Switch really needs to even compete anymore with PlayStation or Xbox. They're their own thing at this point.
Kind of, yeah, but they're competing for time.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
that's the crucial thing. And that was an interesting point that John came up with in the Microsoft Direct we did with Tom Warren, which is that, Phil Spencer was talking about losing the war for the digital library, but then Switch comes along and basically beats PlayStation, with a whole new ecosystem. So, yeah, really interesting stuff. This question from Gatti: what are your totally outrageous takes on Switch successor's gimmick? I'll start with Kinect-like integrated camera for fitness. Man, what sort of hardware disasters have we seen? I was going to say a 3D screen, but they did it with 3DS, and it kind of was a massive sales success in the end.
Yeah.
John, what kind of outrageous gimmick would you like to see?
Maybe they'll bring back the vitality sensor idea, and it'll be built into the Joy-Con. Like, you can just slide it on your finger or something and, finally achieve those dreams that they set out all those years ago. Right. You remember that, right? The vitality sensor?
Yeah, there was going to be some sort of whole new division, whole new sort of era of gaming based around that, right? And it never happened.
Although it technically kind of did on the Nintendo 64. If you remember my Tetris video I did on DF Retro, one of the versions of Tetris for N64 actually shipped with the equivalent of one of those sensors, that like a heart rate monitor that you wear on your finger while you play the game, and it impacted the speed of that game of Tetris based on how fast your heart rate was. It was so.
Well, you could, in theory, do some kind of controller that measured your emotional state then. I think Valve have been talking about this for years.
Yeah,
that's true.
As to whether you want that or not.
I would not.
That's... I don't know, maybe a flip screen, like, the Galaxy Fold. The problem, that way you'd have like a new DS. Problem being, of course, that you wouldn't be able to incorporate any of those elements into docked play. So I think it's a bit of a non-starter.
I don't know. I think they could do a camera again, because AR games like Pokemon AR, all these new AR things, I could imagine Nintendo doing another sort of AR device where you take the Switch out in the world and find Pokemon in the world or something like that, or run along with Mario alongside him or something like that. They could do stuff like that.
It's just Pokemon Go though, and that already exists on phones. Like, it's not. I don't think they would do that on the real mainline.
Not
games.
A gimmick enough. It's not gimmicky enough. It needs.
No, I think it's just that would be impeding on a product that already exists. So,
yeah. Maybe not.
How about this question from Lil Ecto1? Howdy, y'all! Exclamation point.
Rich, hold on. Was that your best?
No.
Was that your best Southern accent? You really got to
It's the
lean
best
it
you're gonna
like,
get.
hey, howdy y'all, kind of like lean into it a little
Gosh,
bit.
John.
Do you want to read the question then, John?
You want me to read it like that?
Yeah.
I
go ahead.
recently viewed an MVG video detailing the potential issues in making the next
gosh.
Switch device easily backwards compatible. Initially, okay, I'm going to stop. That's probably annoying.
Yeah.
Initially, I assumed a Switch successor that lacked backwards compatibility would fall flat on its face. But then I looked around my collection and noticed a DMG, Game Boy Pocket, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance SP, DSi, DSi XL, 2 versions of the 3DS, etc., and realized that I likely would not forfeit my Switch when its newer version arrives. I know John won't flip his OLED model on Switch 2 launch day. That is true. Are we the outliers here? Couldn't the Switch 2 be perfectly successful if it were freed of legacy support for tech launched in 2015? Or is backwards compatibility a necessity at this point?
Interesting question. MVG did put a pretty convincing case forward that it's very difficult to do backwards compatibility because NVIDIA doesn't bake it into the hardware, right? They move on from generation to generation.
Yep.
The question is how robust is the quote unquote bespoke API that they did for Switch, and whether it's portable. I mean, it's Vulkan compatible as well, the Switch, so I should imagine that the Vulkan games would just work fine. It's all about APIs, right? I'm pretty sure they could do it. I mean, that's the
I
thing.
think it might be challenging, but I do think I wouldn't say it's 100% necessary, but I think it's more necessary than it ever was before because, again, people have shifted to these digital libraries, right? Especially, and the competition, it's commonplace to have your account and your purchases are tied to the account, right? And because the Switch was so successful versus, say, the Wii U, for instance, I think people now would be extremely disappointed and upset if it were to launch without support for those prior games. I think, again, they probably could pull it off, but it may have a very negative impact on the initial reception of the unit. You know what I mean? Like, that could hurt it, possibly, and Nintendo should not take for granted that it would be a success. When we all know their checkered history with that. Sometimes they have a huge success followed by a gigantic failure. As you know, so I don't know. What do you guys think on that?
I kind of think they need it. I think they'd be losing a lot of momentum and goodwill if the backwards compatibility function isn't there. But I also appreciate that it's actually going to be technically quite challenging for them to do so. So yeah, tricky, right? And I know there's been some comments from Nintendo execs that they're kind of a bit antsy about the transition period. If they had backwards compatibility, I don't see why they would be. That's the thing. But I guess it's all sort of conjecture at the moment. Just one thing I just want to bear in mind to sort of factor in before we move on from this discussion point, and there's going to be a lot of fake specs. There's going to be a lot of interpretations of the specs when they do arrive that might not live up to expectations, but that's what Nintendo does, right? This is going to be primarily a mobile device still, and battery life is something that you can disregard on a Steam Deck or a ROG Ally, but you can't on a Nintendo device. So, possibly you will get overall results similar to what the Steam Deck and the ROG Ally are doing, but it's going to be through, crafty programming, coding directly to the specifications of the device. Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Nothing more to add on this one for now, right? I'm looking forward to seeing the fakes, though. This first one was a bit disappointing.
Yeah.